Some thank yous aren't rewards. They're sentences passed on those who never spoke up. The clinking of crystal glasses echoed beneath a towering ceiling adorned with drapes of white crystal lights. The entire ballroom of the Grand Regency Hotel in Dallas shimmered under warm golden illumination, reflecting off expensive suits, sparkling evening gowns, and the smiles of people who believed they were witnessing the city's greatest success story. And I sat at the very last table, where the light was dimmer and where almost no one bothered to look. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 55 years old, born and raised in Texas. My hands once framed the very first wooden structures of hundreds of homes and poured the first concrete foundations for buildings people now pass every day without ever knowing who laid the first brick. That I was never good at standing in front of crowds. I always believed that if a job was done well, the craftsman didn't need to appear in the final photograph. For 30 years, I thought I was right. Until that night, the host stepped onto the stage. The music faded. More than 300 guests turned toward the podium at once. On the large LED display behind it, bold letters read, 30 years of vision. I glanced toward Emily. My wife sat at the head table right beside the stage. Her emerald dress hugged her elegant silhouette. Her blonde hair was swept neatly into a bun, and her face wore the same smile I had loved since the days when we shared a single burger because we couldn't afford two. She looked confident, graceful, and belonged there more than anyone else. To be fair, she deserved a lot of credit. Emily was brilliant, articulate, and knew how to earn people's trust with just a few short words. I was never jealous of that. What I never expected was that one day, people would only remember her. Ladies and gentlemen, the board chairman's voice boomed with excitement. Tonight, we aren't just celebrating 30 years of Carter living. We are honoring the woman who turned a small dream into the empire we are all proud of today. Applause erupted like a wave. He smiled toward Emily. Please give a warm round of applause for the person who built all the wonderful things around us. Emily Carter. The entire room stood up in ovation. The heavy scraping of chairs against the marble floor sounded like a sudden, sweeping gust of wind. The applause was so deafening I could feel the table vibrating under my arms that I remained seated. Not out of anger, nor to make a protest. I simply didn't know what I should be standing up for. Emily stepped onto the stage amidst a sea of lights and cheers. She bowed her head in gratitude, accepted the bouquet, and scanned the room with emotional eyes. I couldn't have done this without everyone's support, she said to soft laughter and another round of applause. She began telling the story of those difficult early years. About the bank loans. About our first tiny office. About working late into the night. Every story drew admiring nods from the crowd. I listened. Not because what she said was false, but because every time she told a story, a detail disappeared. And then another. Until the entire narrative was left with only one character. Emily made no mention of the man who stayed up until 3 in the morning handcrafting every table and chair for that first office. No mention of the man who drove the old pickup truck carrying building supplies through muddy roads after heavy rains. No mention of the man who sold his father's only watch to pay 6 workers their first month's wages. No mention of the man who spent nearly half his life standing behind every wall others called success. That MY name was never mentioned. Not once that I looked around the room. Old friends smiled at Emily. Partners raised their glasses to toast her. Even our 2 children stood below the stage, looking up at their mother with eyes full of pride. Nobody looked my way. Perhaps they didn't mean to. Perhaps after all these years, they truly believed everything here was created by Emily alone. That I looked down at my hands. The thick skin, the small scars running along my knuckles, the hardened calluses that never vanished after decades of swinging hammers, sawing wood, and pouring concrete. Those hands had built almost everything in my life. But tonight, for the first time, I understood that some structures don't collapse because of the weather. They collapse because people forget who laid the foundation. People often believe the person holding the microphone is the one who built the stage. I used to believe that silence was stronger than correction. Looking back now, I realize silence has a cost, and sooner or later, someone has to pay it. I wasn't always the quiet man sitting at the back of a ballroom while everyone applauded someone else. There was a time when my entire world fit inside the cab of a faded blue Ford F-150, a steel toolbox rattling in the truck bed every time I hit another pothole on a Texas back road. The dashboard smelled like sun-baked plastic. Sawdust lived permanently in the floor mats, and my hands were always carrying the scent of fresh pine, concrete dust, or machine oil. Back then, I didn't know much. I didn't need much either. As long as I had work waiting for me every morning, I considered myself lucky. Emily met me before there was anything worth admiring. We were both 24. She was finishing her business degree at Southern Methodist University while working evenings at a small insurance office. I was already swinging a framing hammer 10 hours a day, helping build suburban homes that families would fill with birthdays, Christmas trees, and memories that had nothing to do with me. She used to tease me about the calluses on my hands. They're rough enough to sandwood. She'd laugh before slipping her fingers between mine anyway. I always loved that she never seemed embarrassed by the dirt under my fingernails. At least, not back then. Our first apartment sat above an old laundromat on the east side of Dallas. The pipes groaned every winter. The windows leaked whenever heavy rain rolled through. Some nights we'd hear freight trains passing just beyond the neighborhood, the vibration gently shaking our bedroom walls. Emily called it temporary. I called it home. Money was painfully tight. Every dollar had a destination before I even earned it. Rent, groceries, gasoline, student loans. A little savings envelope tucked inside an old coffee can above the refrigerator. Every Friday evening, we'd dump loose change onto the kitchen table and count it together, laughing whenever we found enough quarters for pizza instead of canned soup. Those nights remain some of the richest moments of my life. People assume success begins with million-dollar investments. Most of the time, it begins with 2 folding chairs, 1 secondhand coffee maker, and a couple willing to believe tomorrow will eventually repay today's sacrifices. Emily dreamed bigger than I did. She talked about branding, marketing, growth strategies, expansion. I listened, even when half the words sounded like another language. My dreams were simpler: a reliable truck, a paid-off mortgage, enough steady work to never worry about another overdue bill. Different dreams, same destination. At least that's what I believed. During the day, I'd frame houses for other contractors. At night, I'd renovate garages, replace kitchen cabinets, pour concrete patios, or build custom decks for neighbors willing to pay cash. Some weeks I worked close to 90 hours. I stopped counting after a while. Pain became routine. A bruised shoulder, splinters buried deep beneath my fingernails, knees that ached before sunrise, boots permanently stained with concrete. I told myself every blister meant another brick lay beneath the future Emily and I were building together. When she graduated, I couldn't afford an expensive celebration. Instead, I built her a solid walnut desk inside my father's old workshop. 3 weekends, 42 hours, every drawer cut by hand, every joint measured twice. When I carried it into our apartment, she cried before running her fingers across the smooth finish. "This is the nicest gift anyone has ever given me," she whispered. I believed her. That desk would eventually become the first piece of furniture inside the tiny office where Carter living officially began. Most people remember the ribbon-cutting ceremony years later. Very few remember the empty room before the paint dried. The folding table serving as a reception desk. The extension cords stretched across unfinished floors. The smell of drywall dust hanging in the air. Or the man working alone until midnight installing shelves because hiring another contractor would have cost money we didn't have. I never asked anyone to remember those things. I only assumed Emily always would. The strange thing about foundations is that no one admires them. People admire glass towers, polished marble lobbies, and names engraved on brass plaques. They never stop to wonder what keeps the whole structure standing. The first Carter living office occupied less than 800 square feet inside a neglected warehouse near the Trinity River. Calling it an office was generous. Half the ceiling tiles were stained from an old roof leak. The heating system rattled every time it turned on, and the front door refused to close unless you lifted it slightly before turning the handle. Emily saw potential. I saw a long list of repairs. Before she could invite a single client through those doors, I spent 3 straight weekends transforming the place. I tore out warped drywall, installed new lighting, built custom shelves from reclaimed oak, laid hardwood flooring 1 plank at a time, painted every wall after midnight because daylight hours were reserved for my construction jobs. No one paid me. There wasn't any money to spare. Every improvement was another investment in our future. Sometimes Emily would arrive with sandwiches and coffee just before sunset. She'd sit on an upside-down bucket while watching me work. "I can't believe you're still going," she'd say. I'd grin without looking up. "We'll rest when it's finished." Back then, we still meant both of us. The business grew slowly. Our first client was a retired couple looking for someone to renovate an old lake house. Emily handled every phone call with remarkable confidence. I handled everything else: measurements, materials, scheduling, construction, cleanup. When the project ended, the couple hugged Emily before driving away. "You've built an incredible company," they told her. She smiled politely. Then she pointed toward me. I couldn't have done it without Daniel. It lasted only a few seconds, but she said my name. Looking back, that moment matters more than she probably ever realized. Success rarely arrives all at once. It sneaks into your life disguised as small victories. One satisfied customer becomes 3 referrals. 3 become 10. Soon my evenings disappeared completely. I would finish supervising framing crews at one construction site, drive across town to another, then spend the night completing Carter living projects until 2 or 3 in the morning. There were weeks when I slept less than 4 hours a night. Emily worried about me. "You can't keep this up forever." "I don't have to," I answered, "just until we're stable." The funny thing about stability is that the finish line keeps moving. Every time we reached one goal, another appeared farther ahead. A larger office, more employees, company trucks, insurance, payroll, taxes, equipment. Every milestone demanded another sacrifice. I made most of them without thinking twice. When we hired our first employee, I gave him my own workshop because there wasn't room for both of us. When we hired 5 more, I moved into an unfinished storage area behind the building, turning an old workbench into my desk. Emily occupied the office overlooking the parking lot. Clients expected to meet the owner there. I preferred sawdust anyway. As months became years, something else quietly changed. The business no longer revolved around craftsmanship. It revolved around perception. Emily discovered social media before most of our competitors. She started posting videos, behind-the-scenes photos, customer testimonials, inspirational captions about perseverance. People loved them. Soon local newspapers wanted interviews. Business magazines requested photographs. Community organizations invited her to speak about entrepreneurship. Every article featured the same smiling portrait. Every headline celebrated the visionary founder. Meanwhile, I was usually somewhere outside the camera frame wearing dusty work boots, arguing with electricians, unloading lumber, or fixing mistakes before clients ever noticed them. None of that bothered me. At first, someone had to keep the company running while someone else represented it. That seemed fair. Whenever photographers visited, I'd step aside instinctively. "Get Emily in the picture," I'd say. "She's better at this." Nobody had to ask twice. Eventually, they stopped asking where I was altogether. One afternoon, I walked through the reception area carrying a stack of plywood samples. A delivery driver looked up from signing paperwork. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you maintenance?" I almost laughed. Maintenance? Inside a company carrying my own last name. I simply signed for the shipment and kept walking. That evening, I told Emily the story over dinner. She smiled sympathetically, but never looked up from answering emails on her laptop. "I guess people just assume things," she said. Maybe they did. Or maybe assumptions become easier when they're never corrected. I didn't know it then, but that small misunderstanding was only the beginning. History isn't rewritten overnight. It happens one forgotten introduction, one missing photograph, one interview at a time. Until eventually, even the people who lived the story begin remembering it differently. Memory is a peculiar craftsman. It doesn't always erase the truth. Sometimes it simply sands away the edges until the story feels smoother than it ever was. The first time I noticed it wasn't during an interview or an award ceremony. It happened around our own dinner table. Our son, Ryan, had just turned 16. Our daughter, Claire, was home from college for Thanksgiving. The house buzzed with the familiar sounds that had once made every sacrifice worthwhile. The football game humming softly in the living room. Silverware clinking against ceramic plates. Emily laughing while carving the turkey. For a few hours, everything felt normal. Then Claire smiled at her mother and said something that has echoed in my mind ever since. "Mom, I still can't believe you built this whole company from nothing." Emily looked up. She smiled. "Well, it wasn't easy." That was all she said. For simple words. She didn't correct her. She didn't mention me. She didn't even glance in my direction. I waited. Surely she'd add something. Daniel worked just as hard. Your father made all of this possible. We did it together. But those words never came. The conversation drifted naturally toward holiday plans, travel, and Ryan's basketball season. Everyone kept eating. Everyone except me. I suddenly realized something frightening. My own children weren't lying. They genuinely believed their mother had built Carter living almost entirely on her own. Somewhere over the years, the truth hadn't been stolen. It had been replaced. Not all at once. Piece by piece. The following spring, Emily was invited to speak at a regional business conference. I wasn't planning to attend. Weekends usually meant job sites, inspections, or helping our crew solve problems before Monday morning. But one of our project managers convinced me to stop by after lunch. You should hear your wife speak, he said. She's inspiring. He wasn't wrong. Emily walked confidently across the stage beneath bright white lights. The audience loved her immediately. She spoke about courage, about taking risks, about believing in impossible dreams. Every sentence landed perfectly. Every joke earned laughter. Every pause drew applause. She had become exceptional at telling our story. Or perhaps I should say her story. I remember signing the lease for our very first office, she told the audience. I remember wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I remembered that day too. I remembered replacing the electrical wiring before she ever saw the building because the old circuits were dangerous. I remembered sleeping on the unfinished office floor after working 31 straight hours so the contractors could begin renovations before sunrise. I remembered every blister, every invoice, every nail driven into those walls. The audience couldn't remember those things. They had never been told. Then came another sentence. The company grew because I refused to give up. Again, not false, just incomplete. Funny how omission can sometimes change a story more than an outright lie. After the presentation, dozens of young entrepreneurs lined up to meet her. One woman in her 20s shook Emily's hand with tears in her eyes. You've shown me women really can build something extraordinary without depending on anyone. Emily hugged her warmly. I'm so glad my story helped. My story, not ours. Mine had disappeared so quietly that no one noticed it leaving, including me. Driving home that evening, I kept waiting for Emily to mention the speech. Instead, she asked whether the crews had finished installing windows at one of our commercial projects. I answered automatically. She nodded, then returned to scrolling through congratulatory messages on her phone. Her interview was already being shared online. Thousands of views within hours. Comments poured in. What an incredible self-made woman. Such an inspiration. A true visionary. I read every one of them. Not because I wanted recognition, because I kept wondering if anyone would ask the obvious question. Who actually built the buildings she was talking about? No one did. That night, I walked through our workshop behind the house. Every tool rested exactly where I'd left it. The scent of cedar still lingered in the air. Half-finished cabinets stood against one wall waiting for installation the following week. This room had never cared about applause. Wood didn't care who received the credit. Concrete didn't recognize magazine covers. A hammer only knew the hand that swung it. I rested my palm against an old workbench scarred by decades of saw cuts. It suddenly occurred to me that this bench knew more about Carter living than anyone sitting in board meetings ever would. It had witnessed every blueprint, every late-night decision, every impossible deadline, every sacrifice. Unlike people, wood never forgets who shaped it. Respect doesn't disappear in a single argument. It fades so gradually that one day you realize people have stopped seeing you altogether, and no one, not even you, can remember exactly when it happened. The company was thriving. We had grown from a cramped warehouse into a beautiful headquarters with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Dallas. There were more than 80 employees, a fleet of branded trucks, and projects scheduled months in advance. People drove past our buildings every day without knowing that I could still remember every blueprint, every foundation, every beam hidden behind fresh paint. Success had become visible. The work that created it had not. Emily's calendar stayed full. Breakfast meetings, industry panels, charity galas, television interviews, leadership retreats. She became the face everyone recognized. I became the man everyone assumed worked somewhere behind the scenes. Oddly enough, I never minded working behind the scenes. What began to hurt was realizing I no longer existed anywhere else. One Monday morning, I walked into the conference room, carrying rolled-up construction drawings. Our executive team was already seated around the table. Emily stood near the presentation screen discussing plans for a new residential development. As I entered, the newest marketing director smiled politely. "Oh," he said, "could you leave those by the wall? Mrs. Carter will need them." "Mrs. Carter, not your wife. Not Emily. Just Mrs. Carter." I nodded without correcting him. The meeting continued. For nearly an hour, I listened as people debated budgets, timelines, branding campaigns, and architectural concepts. Several ideas sounded impressive. Unfortunately, they couldn't actually be built. Finally, one engineer hesitated before speaking. "We're not sure the retaining wall is structurally possible." Silence filled the room. Emily looked around. Then her eyes settled on me. "Daniel." She said only my first name. Nothing more. No explanation. No introduction. Everyone turned toward me as though they'd suddenly remembered another person was sitting in the room. I walked to the drawings, uncapped a marker, and sketched an alternative support system directly onto the blueprint. The room became quiet. Questions followed. Measurements, load calculations, drainage solutions. Within 15 minutes, the problem was solved. Several executives thanked Emily for finding an answer so quickly. She smiled. I waited. Surely this time. Actually, Daniel solved that. Those words never arrived. The meeting ended. People gathered their laptops and coffee cups before filing into the hallway. One young project coordinator stopped beside me. "You should think about becoming an engineer," he said sincerely. "You've got a real talent for this." I thanked him. He had no idea I had spent 3 decades designing, correcting, and physically building projects larger than anything he'd ever seen. How could he? No one had ever told him. The strange part wasn't that strangers misunderstood my role. It was that Emily had stopped noticing they misunderstood it. Correction had once come naturally to her. Now silence seemed effortless. That evening we attended a neighborhood barbecue hosted by longtime friends. People gathered around the backyard fire pit as children chased one another across the lawn. Our neighbor, Linda, complimented the recent expansion of Carter Living. "Emily," she said proudly, "you've built such an incredible legacy." Emily smiled. "Thank you. Nothing else." Ryan joined the conversation. "I've always admired Mom's work ethic," he added. "She's never stopped building the business. Never stopped building." I stared into the flames dancing across the firewood. For just a second, I wondered whether my own son had ever seen me come home covered in drywall dust. Whether he remembered waiting in the truck while I picked up lumber before dawn. Whether he recalled all those Saturday mornings when I left before sunrise and returned after dark carrying tools heavier than he had been as a child. Perhaps he didn't. Children remember birthdays, vacations, school plays. They rarely remember why their father missed them. Someone has to pay for those memories. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I wandered through our garage workshop alone. An old leather tool belt hung exactly where I'd left it years earlier. The stitching had begun to crack. The hammer loop was polished smooth from decades of use. I picked it up. It felt heavier than I remembered. Not because the leather had changed, because I finally understood what it represented. Every scar on that belt had helped build the life people celebrated. Yet the closer we came to success, the farther away its owners seemed to disappear. Standing there in the quiet workshop, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. If the people I loved no longer remembered who built our foundation, how much longer before Emily forgot it too? There comes a moment when you stop asking why people no longer see you. Instead, you begin asking a far more difficult question. Why have you spent so many years pretending it doesn't matter? A week after the Anniversary Gala, I received a phone call that almost changed everything. The caller introduced himself as Michael Foster, a producer for a documentary series featuring American family businesses that had transformed local communities. "We'd love to tell the story of Carter Living," he said. "Your company's journey is exactly what we're looking for." I smiled. For the first time in years, I imagined someone taking the time to understand how the company had truly been built. Michael continued, "We've already interviewed several board members. Mrs. Carter was incredible. We'd also like to speak with a few longtime employees." I waited. There was a brief silence. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And Emily mentioned that you still oversee some construction projects. We'd love a few comments from you about operations." Operations. 30 years reduced to one word. I agreed anyway. The interview was scheduled for the following Thursday. For several days I thought about what I might say. Not because I wanted recognition, because I wanted accuracy. I wanted someone to know that before there were polished offices and magazine covers, there had been freezing mornings on unfinished job sites and sleepless nights spent wondering whether payroll checks would clear. I wanted the foundation to matter as much as the finished building. On Thursday morning, the film crew arrived at headquarters. Large cameras, portable lighting, wireless microphones. Everyone seemed excited. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about appearing in the documentary. Emily greeted the crew effortlessly. She had done this dozens of times before. I watched from the workshop behind the building while tightening cabinet hinges on a custom reception desk for one of our newest clients. Around noon, Michael finally walked inside. He looked around with genuine curiosity. "So this is where everything gets built?" I nodded. He ran his hand across the edge of the workbench. "This feels authentic." "It is." For nearly an hour, he asked thoughtful questions. How had I learned woodworking? Why had I chosen construction? What had the early years been like? No one had asked me those questions in a very long time. The answers came naturally. I spoke about my father teaching me how to square a foundation before sunrise, about believing every nail should disappear into the wood because craftsmanship meant leaving no evidence of the effort behind it, about sleeping inside unfinished offices because driving home would have wasted 2 precious hours. Michael listened carefully. Unlike most people, he interrupted only to understand, not to redirect. Finally, he asked the question that stopped me cold. "Who do you think built Carter Living?" Such a simple sentence. Yet I couldn't answer immediately. The honest response was obvious. Both of us. Emily gave the company its voice. I gave it its bones. Neither could have survived without the other, at least in the beginning. I finally smiled. "My wife and I built it together." Michael nodded slowly. "I don't think that's how most people tell the story." Neither did I. Before I could say anything else, someone called him outside. A production assistant hurried across the workshop carrying a clipboard. "Michael, we need you." He apologized before leaving. I watched the crew disappear toward the executive offices. The workshop became quiet again. Only the steady ticking of the old wall clock remained. That evening, while everyone celebrated another successful filming day, I stayed behind to finish organizing a storage room that hadn't been touched in years. Dust floated through narrow beams of evening sunlight. Old filing cabinets lined one wall. Cardboard boxes filled with decades of forgotten paperwork stood stacked almost to the ceiling. I pulled one box onto the floor. Inside were yellowed receipts, supplier invoices, handwritten job estimates, payroll records. Nothing unusual. Then I opened another. This one contained rolled architectural drawings tied together with faded blue ribbon. Every page carried my handwriting. Measurements, material calculations, structural notes, some dated back nearly 30 years. Beneath them lay an old leather notebook. Then another, and another. I opened the first journal. Every page documented our earliest projects. Dates, costs, crew members, problems solved, decisions made. The entire history of Carter Living rested quietly inside those forgotten boxes. Not opinions, not memories, evidence. For the first time since that applause-filled gala, I realized something important. The truth had never disappeared. It had simply been waiting in the dark for someone willing to open the right box. Evidence has no ego. It doesn't raise its voice, demand applause, or argue with anyone. It simply waits, patiently, until someone finally has the courage to uncover it. For the next several nights, I stayed alone at the office long after everyone had gone home. The building changed after dark. The cheerful conversations disappeared. Computer screens went black. Only the emergency exit signs cast faint green reflections across the polished floors. I preferred it that way. Silence made it easier to hear the past. One cardboard box became 5. 5 became 20. Every forgotten cabinet seemed to hold another piece of our beginning. Old payroll ledgers with my signature authorizing checks before we could afford an accountant. Blueprints covered in my handwritten revisions. Receipts for lumber, steel, electrical supplies, and concrete purchased with money Emily and I barely had. There were photographs too, hundreds of them. Not glamorous publicity photos, real ones. Snapshots covered in fingerprints and sawdust. Emily wearing jeans while painting unfinished walls. Me balancing on roof trusses before sunrise. Our children sleeping on folded blankets inside empty offices because we couldn't afford babysitters while we worked weekends. I sat quietly for a long time holding one faded photograph. Ryan couldn't have been older than 5. He was wearing an oversized yellow construction helmet that kept sliding over his eyes while I taught him how to measure a 2x4 with a tape measure. Someone had written the date on the back, April 18th, 1999. I smiled despite myself. He had forgotten that day. I hadn't. Near the bottom of another box, I discovered several VHS tapes carefully labeled in black marker. Office renovation, lake house project, first headquarters, company picnic. I almost laughed. Who still owned a VCR? Fortunately, our IT manager collected vintage electronics as a hobby. The next afternoon, I asked if he had an old player sitting around. Actually, he said, I keep one in storage. By evening, I was watching 30-year-old footage on an outdated television inside my workshop. The picture flickered, the colors drifted, but the truth remained perfectly clear. There I was, covered in drywall dust, building reception desks, installing windows, lifting roof beams with crews that no longer worked for us. Then the camera turned. Emily stood beside me carrying blueprints. She smiled toward whoever held the camera. Daniel figured out another impossible problem, she laughed. I don't know what we'd do without him. I paused the tape. For several seconds, I simply stared at the frozen image. Not because it proved I had worked hard. I never doubted that. Because it proved something else. Once upon a time, Emily remembered. The next tape showed our first office opening. Customers walked through the front door while Emily proudly introduced each room. Again and again, she repeated the same sentence. My husband built this. My husband designed that. My husband hasn't slept in days getting this ready. She said it naturally, without hesitation, without embarrassment. Somewhere between those old recordings and the woman standing beneath crystal chandeliers accepting Lifetime Achievement Awards, something had changed. The following Monday, Michael Foster returned to gather additional footage. This time he wandered into the archive room where I was organizing documents. His eyes widened. What is all this? Our history. He knelt beside one of the boxes. Carefully, he opened a leather journal. Every page contained dated entries. Hours worked, problems solved, material costs, sketches, weather conditions, employee names. Michael turned another page, then another. He looked up at me slowly. Daniel, you documented everything. I never intended anyone else to read it. He picked up one of the early photographs, then another. Soon the table was covered with evidence spanning nearly 3 decades. Blueprints, contracts, letters, videos, construction permits bearing my signature, original business plans filled with handwritten notes from both Emily and me. No dramatic speeches, no accusations, just facts. Michael remained silent for a long time. Finally, he asked, does Emily know these still exist? I don't think she's looked inside this room in over 15 years. He nodded thoughtfully. Before leaving, he carefully placed one photograph back into its box. You know, he said quietly, there's a big difference between telling a compelling story and telling the complete one. After he walked away, I remained alone beneath the dim warehouse lights. For years, I had believed my voice was the only thing capable of defending the truth. I had been wrong. The truth had already found its own voice. It spoke through faded ink, through worn blueprints, through old videotapes, through thousands of ordinary moments that no amount of applause could rewrite. For the first time in years, I no longer wondered whether anyone would believe me. I wondered what would happen when everyone saw what had been there all along.